Detroit in the 80s is a war zone with money on the corners and heat in every shadow. And in the middle of all that, a white kid starts moving like he belongs. He gets close to heavy names, learns how the game really works, and starts thinking he can play both sides without getting crushed. But the streets do not forgive, and the system does not protect. One minute you are useful, the next minute you are disposable. And once a label sticks in that world, it follows you into every room, every case, every cell. This story is not just about crime. It is about power, loyalty, and the kind of betrayal that turns a whole life into a warning sign. But how did it go from a teenager chasing status to a name that still rings decades later? Join us as we break down the rise, the snitch rumors, and the cold punishment behind white boy Rick. July 18th, 1969 is the start of Richard Wersch Jr.'s story. He grows up on Detroit's east side, about 7 miles from downtown, in a small brick house on Hampshire Street, near Dickerson Avenue. This is working class life, not a movie mansion. But as the early 1980s hit, the neighborhood starts sliding. Auto jobs drop off, people with money move out, and blocks start looking empty. By the mid-1980s, crack is in the mix, and Detroit catches a national name for violence and street chaos. Rick is still a kid, but he sees it up close every day. He goes to church with his grandparents and plays baseball, but outside that, the streets feel like a pressure cooker. In this kind of place, you learn how to move smart, or you get swallowed. And Rick is walking right toward the part of the story where the city starts picking sides. Rick's dad, Richard Wersch Sr., stays on hustle mode. He is tall, wiry, and always chasing a dollar. He sells sporting goods and electronics, and he sells gear to pirate cable. He also makes serious side money dealing firearms. He runs gun shows, manages a gun store, and people in the neighborhood know the Wersch house is a spot you can check if you need heat. Rick learns guns early. His father teaches him when he is 8 and gives him a .22 rifle. Rick and his friend Dave Mikowski even use it to shoot rats in alleyways. Weapons move through that house like it is normal traffic. In Detroit, guns and dope stay connected, even when folks act like they are separate lanes. Rick Sr. does not ask customers what they do for a living. That means Rick grows up with a front row view of how street money moves. And once that becomes normal, it makes the next step way more dangerous, because law enforcement is about to step into this world and treat a kid like a tool. Rick's parents fight a lot. When Rick is young, his mom Darlene leaves for the suburbs and later remarries. Rick stays on the east side with his dad and his sister Dawn. As the neighborhood keeps breaking down, Rick starts wanting out for real. More than once, he walks out past the city boundary at 8 Mile, calls his mom from a payphone, and begs her to pick him up because he does not want to go back to Hampshire. For a while, he stays with his mom in Clinton Township and calls it culture shock, like going from hell to heaven. The school has a pool and clean baseball fields, and the whole vibe feels safer. But Rick clashes with his stepdad, and before a year even passes, Rick Sr. pulls him back to the east side. His mom later says Rick's dad leaves town for business and leaves the kids alone when Rick is still young. That back and forth teaches Rick a hard lesson early. Adults make moves, and the kids have to live with the fallout. That mindset becomes fuel for what happens next. As the early 1980s roll, Rick runs around an east side neighborhood that is emptying out. He and his friends play with firecrackers, break stuff for fun, and carry that wild energy like it is just another day. In 1981, his grandparents take him to the Miami area on vacation. He sees rich neighborhoods where drug dealers are common, and where nice things mean pools, mopeds, and luxury cars. That image sticks in his head. Back in Detroit, Dawn gets into crack and dates a small-time crook named Terrence Bell. Rick says Bell shows him the ropes of petty crime, and Rick admits he is breaking into houses. In that world, the rules do not feel like school rules anymore. The streets teach a different code, and it sounds like this: get money, stay sharp, and do not look weak. Rick is still a kid, but the city is training him fast. And then on one specific date, his life collides with law enforcement in a way that changes the whole path. March 24th, 1984 hits like a switch flip. Rick is 14 and already driving his grandmother's car. He leaves the keys in the ignition at a gas station, and a man jumps in the car with a gun. Dawn honks. Rick jumps into her car, and they chase the thief onto I-94. Rick grabs a .22 revolver from Dawn's purse and fires, but the gun jams after 2 shots. An off-duty officer sees it, pulls them over, and Rick was arrested. The case gets dismissed later because the officer never shows for trial. But that moment still matters, because Rick is not moving like a normal middle school kid. He is already in the mix with guns, cars, and split-second decisions that can get someone hurt or killed. It also puts law enforcement right in his face. Now they see the type of kid he is: bold, reckless, and not scared to act. On the street, that can look like status. To cops and agents, that can look like a piece they can use. and Detroit is about to start hunting for inside access. On the east side, the real weight belongs to the Curry twins, Leo Big Man Curry and Johnny Little Man Curry. They run a serious drug operation. Johnny moves like a careful businessman. He watches money and tries to avoid arrests. Leo is louder and flashier, the type to bring extra attention. Rick meets their younger brother Rudell Boo Curry, and that link pulls Rick into their orbit. He starts showing up at places like Royal Skateland, where the crew hangs out. Soon people see him riding in Johnny Curry's BMW, going to Tigers games, and walking into clubs because somebody says he's with us. Rick is a white kid in a world that is mostly black, but the word on the street is he fits in anyway, like a hood rat, because he moves like the environment, not like the suburbs. Then the streets stamp him even harder. He gets shot in the stomach at 15 with a .357, and he comes out with a colostomy bag. But in that world, getting shot can turn into a badge, not a warning. And that badge pulls him deeper. Rick says he is not a user, and he does not want to be a junkie. He wants money. Rick keeps getting closer to the Curry circle, and that means he is around people who do not forgive mistakes. At the same time, a second world is opening behind the scenes. That double life is where everything turns gritty. Because once you become useful to law enforcement, they want more. And once you become useful to street crews, they want loyalty. Rick is walking into a trap where both sides can claim him. And the first pull comes through his own father, like it always does in stories where kids get thrown into adult wars. By the mid-1980s, Rick Sr. is already working as a police informant. The FBI comes to the Wersch home looking for information. They show pictures and ask Rick Sr. to recognize faces, but he does not have answers like that. The 14-year-old does. Rick Jr. knows the names, knows who is who, and knows what is moving in the neighborhood. Rick Sr. sees the money as a way to keep food on the table and says, "I took the money. I wasn't doing all that well at the time, and I thought it was the right thing. Keep some drug dealers off the street and get paid for it." Rick Jr. sees excitement in it and says, "What kid doesn't want to be an undercover cop when he's 14, 15 years old?" That quote is a warning in plain words. A teenager hears undercover and thinks it is a game. Adults hear undercover and think it is a weapon. Rick starts speaking with police alongside his father, then goes solo. The FBI records tips under the father's name, even though the kid is the one feeding intel. This is where the snitch part of the story starts breathing. Not later, right now. In 1984, Rick starts working as an informant for the FBI and Detroit police while he is still a teenager. According to Rick, Detroit police and FBI agent Herman Groman start pushing him toward bigger risks. They want him to go undercover, make drug buys from the Curry organization, and even sell product to build trust with the Curry brothers. Groman later confirms Detroit police instruct Rick to make drug buys, even if he denies having a personal role in those operations. Either way, the kid is getting pulled closer to the flame. He is hanging with the Curry crew, making friends with dangerous people, and stepping deeper just to keep feeding information. That is not childhood. That is a crash course in betrayal and survival. The nickname White Boy Rick does not come from the street like that. It is not what his people call him, and it is not even a name he claims as his own. Reporters coin it and run with it because the angle sells. A baby-faced white teen around major black drug figures on Detroit's east side is shock value, and the media eats it up. Stories paint him in mink coats, chains, a diamond Rolex, and a white Jeep with the snowman on the back. A local TV reporter reveals him like a plot twist in a big crackdown story, calling him a major player and hinting he might be supplying big crews. That is how the legend gets minted, and once the legend is out, it starts swallowing the real person. Some accounts say the press overstates his status and turns him into a cartel boss on TV. Other parts say the truth is more complicated because he starts as an informant, gets pulled deeper, then keeps moving on his own. But headlines do not care about complicated. They care about a clean story that hits hard. The street wants him for reputation. The cops want him for credit. And Rick keeps thinking he can play both sides while the ground under him keeps cracking. In the mid-1980s, the roots of Operation Backbone start showing themselves, and one spark is the murder of 13-year-old Damian Lucas. He is killed in a drive-by shooting that is reportedly meant for his uncle, Leon Lucas. Leon allegedly owes money to Leo Curry, and the FBI already has the Curry organization under investigation. FBI agent Herman Groman has a wiretap on Johnny Curry's phone, and he hears Curry talking about a recent homicide of a 13-year-old bringing heat on the organization. But Detroit homicide investigators push charges toward another man, Lakeus Davis, and they do not seriously chase the Curry angle. That makes Groman suspicious, and he tries to contact homicide to reverse course, but the department is not receptive and moves ahead anyway. Then another detail pops up. After the Lucas murder, Johnny Curry calls unlisted numbers linked to DPD, Sergeant James Jimmy Harris, and Gil Hill, who was head of homicide. The biggest detail comes from an informant in the Curry narcotics investigation, and that informant is Rick Wersha Jr. Rick tells the FBI he is in a car with Johnny Curry, while Curry speaks on a hands-free car phone with Gil Hill. Rick says Hill tells Curry, "Don't worry about nothing. I'll take care of it." Rick also reports Curry saying, "Everything's going to be all right. I've got head of homicide on our team. Don't worry about nothing. He is going to take care of it for us." That is the hinge point, because now Rick is not just a kid passing street talk. He is a kid holding words that can burn powerful people. And once you snitch on the wrong power, the street is not the only thing you have to fear. Spring 1985 hits, and Rick is already out of school. He is close enough to the Curry circle that they take him to Las Vegas for the Tommy Hearns Marvin Hagler fight at Caesar's Palace. That is not a kid trip, that is a crew move. It tells everybody he is around people with real pull and real money. His father later explains what he sees happening. "My son became sick on power, the excitement, the prestige, the money, and the glamour of selling." That is not just pride, that is a warning. Rick starts stacking cars even though he has no license. He rides around with loud sound systems, trying to look like he is up. He keeps trying to level up, because on the east side, looking broke can get you treated broke. But Detroit is not a safe market. The drug scene is violent and competitive. Dealers get hit in broad daylight. People talk about kingpins getting killed even in hospitals and stores. That is how reckless the era gets. If you are touching money, you are also touching danger. Rick is not a retail corner seller the way people imagine. One part of the story says he moves into heavier weight, selling kilos to other dealers. That is where the real money is. That is also where the real heat comes from. The more weight you move, the more eyes you pull. The city is already hot, and now Rick is moving around with two targets on his back. One from the street, one from the system, and the next shift makes it worse. June 1986 comes, and later accounts tied to FBI records say the relationship with the Wershas gets closed on the father. That timing matters because it sets the stage for what comes next. The calls slow down, the guidance fades, the doors stop opening. The handlers may back off because they believe Rick is starting to deal for real. One agent, Herman Groman, tells Rick Sr. they have evidence. Rick Sr. even remembers being played an audio recording. Whatever the exact reason is, the result is the same. The safety net starts disappearing. And in Detroit, once your cover fades, you do not turn back into a normal kid. You become exposed. You become a rumor. You become a question mark people want to answer with violence. You are still around the same crews, still in the same neighborhoods, still seeing the same faces, but now you're standing there without protection. That is when every little move starts looking suspicious. Every new car looks like a flex. Every pocket of cash looks like a reason. Every connection looks like a threat. And with Rick, the street already knows he has been around law enforcement before. So once the line goes quiet, it does not make him safer. It makes him easier to blame. It makes him easier to sacrifice. He is still trying to live like he is untouchable. But in real life, the streets do not care about confidence. They care about paperwork and whispers. And those whispers are about to collide with a police cruiser. May 22nd, 1987 arrives, and Rick is 17. He is riding in the passenger seat of a Ford Thunderbird driven by an associate. They stop near his family's house. A police cruiser is already sitting there. Rick says he already knows the officer, Rodney Grandison. That detail changes the feel of the whole moment because it is not a mystery stop. It feels personal. The cruiser follows them. The lights come on. The driver pulls over next to the Wersh house. Rick steps out and Grandison sees a Kroger shopping bag on the floor in front of Rick's seat. Police look inside and find about $30,000 in cash. That is not loose change. That is the kind of money that makes cops lock in and start digging like it is a treasure hunt. Rick tries to stop them. A struggle breaks out. It turns into a scene right on the street, right by the house. In the chaos, Rick's father grabs the bag and hands it to Dawn. Dawn runs it into Rick's grandparents' house and hides it in a linen closet. That is a quick practice kind of move, like the family already knows what the cops are going to do next. Rick runs through backyards trying to get away. Police chase him down. He is arrested one street over. He gets roughed up and goes to the hospital. A partner admits punching him during the fight. Now the moment is not just an arrest, it is also a brawl. And once it gets physical, everybody starts arguing about what is real and what is revenge. Then the case takes its sharpest turn. According to police reports, within a couple hours, officers get an anonymous tip. The caller claims Rick stashed a cardboard box under a nearby porch before he got grabbed. Police recover the box and say it has 8 kilos of cocaine inside. That is not a small charge. That is weight. That is the kind of weight that flips a teenager into a life case. And once that box enters the story, the "he talked to the feds" angle stops being a scary rumor and starts being a trap, because now the streets can say he is police, and the system can say he is a major dope man. Either way, Rick is boxed in, and the next thing waiting for him is not street justice. It is a law designed to bury people. Rick is arrested for possessing cocaine in excess of 8 kilograms. He is prosecuted under Michigan's 650 lifer law, a statute passed in 1973. The rule is simple and brutal. Possession of more than 650 grams of cocaine or heroin mandates life imprisonment without parole. January 1988 arrives, and Wersch walks into Frank Murphy Hall of Justice in downtown Detroit for trial. His parents are with him. He is wearing a double-breasted suit and alligator loafers. The scene looks like a movie, but it is real. Media packs the place, including a 60 Minutes crew. Even people from the drug world show up, because this case has street buzz. Pagers keep going off like the courthouse is just another block on the east side. Wersch acts like he likes his chances. In the halls, he jokes around. He complains his lawyers will not let him go to Pistons games anymore because he might get caught on camera. He even straightens a reporter's tie mid-interview, like it is nothing. He is moving like a kid who thinks he can talk his way out of a storm. Inside the courtroom, the tension stays high. Grandison testifies he has never seen Wersch before the arrest night. Wersch scowls. Prosecutor Robert Healy accuses him of giving the bad eye. Wersch snaps back. The judge tells Healy to cut out dramatics. Even the judge can feel the theater building. The defense argues police plant drugs to cover a beating. They say Wersch gets struck with a pistol. Then the closing line hits hard. With all the lies and flaws, it repels you and makes you want to shout, "No way, no way." That is not just law talk. That is a gut reaction to a story that feels crooked. And behind all that noise, one question stays quiet, but heavy. If Rick really works with the feds before, why is nobody saying it out loud in that courtroom? The jury takes 4 days. They send notes twice saying they are deadlocked. Then the guilty verdict lands. He sits expressionless. His mother weeps softly. His father stands up, grabs his coat, storms out, and ignores a deputy's order to sit down. 3 weeks later, sentencing feels like a formality. The judge talks about the young people in the room, decked out in gold chains and dressed like the drug trade. Then the judge warns Wersch that if those kids survive, they will probably join him as neighbors in prison. It sounds like a lecture, but it is also a message to the whole scene. The court is basically saying, this is what happens when you play this game. In another retelling, Wersch later says a judge calls him worse than a murderer, and that the court throws the book at him, giving him life without parole for a non-violent drug conviction. However it is said, the outcome is the same. The system locks the door and acts like it is closing a chapter. The media loves it. They love the image of a quiet white kid turned drug lord. But while that image spreads outside, something else starts boiling inside the family, because Rick's father is not staying quiet. While the jury is still deliberating, Rick Sr. confronts someone from the No Crack crew in the hallway. He says, "You better not sleep too well," according to a cop. Soon after, Rick Sr. was arrested, charged with threatening an officer. A raid turns up illegal silencers too. Now the father's in trouble, while the son is fighting for his life in court. From his cell, Rick Sr. starts giving interviews. He tells reporters something that sounds wild at the time. He says both he and his son work as informants. He says it with anger, not politics. "They used me," he says, "and they used my son." Then he tells Detroit Monthly, "And now they turn around and f us over." Nobody wants to hear it. The FBI hides behind policy and says they will neither confirm nor deny. An assistant U.S. attorney doubts the story and says he would have been told. Even Wersch's lawyer, William Bufalino II, downplays it, saying maybe the dad, but no way, the son. Rick Sr. names an FBI agent, James Dixon, as one handler. Dixon refuses to comment back then and calls the idea of betrayal ridiculous. He resigns that same year and goes quiet publicly. Later, when tracked down by phone, Dixon finally admits it when pressed. After a long pause, he says, "Yes, that one word changes the temperature, because now it is not just a dad talking crazy. A handler admits it, and once that happens, the question gets nasty. If the truth is real, why does it never show up when Rick is 17 and facing a sentence that never ends? And if it stays hidden, who benefits from that silence? The streets have a code. The system has a code too. Rick gets crushed between both. Years later, people who really know Detroit's drug era start pushing back on the legend. The name White Boy Rick rings loud. Steve Fishman is a major Detroit defense attorney. He represents real bosses. He calls the idea of an 18-year-old being a boss of the streets ridiculous. He says it is a joke among lawyers that people put Wersch on the level of men like Johnny Curry. That is a big statement because it cuts through the hype. It says the street story gets bigger than the street facts. Wersh's reputation grows from rumors that he supplies the Chambers brothers. But BJ Chambers later says Wersh rarely does business with him. If BJ is short, Wersh might sell him a kilo or 3 to hold him over. And that is it. No big partnership, no kingpin pipeline. BJ describes Wersh less like a mastermind and more like a kid getting high off the lifestyle, a kid intoxicated by being in the game, a kid getting used by bigger suppliers who need a hot market. Wersh is moving weight, but he is not running a tight crew. BJ says he does not have the foot soldiers to move kilos smoothly. He even gets ripped off by his own people sometimes. That is not how real bosses move. Then it gets messy. BJ says Wersh sells below normal price when he is strapped for cash. That starts beef because he is undercutting the market and quoting different prices. That kind of move makes enemies fast, not because of ego, because money gets touched. And when money gets touched, crews start thinking about making examples. BJ also says keeping multiple kilos in one box, like the box under the porch, is a rookie move. Tom McClain from the No Crack crew says he does not remember being impressed. He calls Wersh kind of like a goofy kid. That is not hate, that is dismissal. And in gang life, dismissal is dangerous because it makes you look weak to predators and loud to police. Herman Groman also downsizes the legend. He says there is a short period where Wersh might put together a 6-figure deal, but not the level people claim. Groman describes him as a wholesaler, a weight man, missing the huge margins that come from being vertically integrated. That is a key detail. It means he is not running every layer. He is not controlling the whole pipeline. He is moving product and flipping it. Groman even puts numbers on it. He says Wersh buys around $12,000 a kilo and deals around $17,000. He claims Wersh makes about $250,000 total. Even if it is higher, nobody credible pegs him anywhere near the Chambers crew's reported $55 million per year, and yet the myth sticks harder than the scale. That is the problem. The name gets bigger than the truth, and in Detroit, a big name brings big pressure. After the case turns into a life sentence, the story starts carrying a different kind of poison. Wersh later says his lawyers believe they cannot bring up his help to law enforcement during trial. They think there is no proof they can show. They think police and the FBI will deny it. So the very thing that is supposed to explain the story gets locked away, not because it is fake, because it is dangerous and hard to prove. He also claims Bufalino denies it to the press to protect him from getting hit inside prison. That is not court strategy. That is survival strategy. He says nobody tells him Wersh works with the FBI. He calls it plain baloney. He says if it is true, someone would come to them. Then he gets told documents and sources support Wersh's claims. Healy admits it could be possible, but still insists the FBI is not asking prosecutors to do anything about it. That is the trapdoor logic that ruins people. Everybody points up the chain. I wasn't told. They didn't ask. So the truth can exist, but it has no power. It is like the truth is locked in a safe, and nobody will admit they have the key. After the verdict, he is led away to the gray cell block next door. In that moment, the weight still has not fully landed. It takes time for it to sink in, and for him, time becomes the punishment. Years, decades, whole eras passing while the same label follows him. March 27th, 2003 arrives, and Wersh finally gets a parole board hearing. He does not dress the story up. He tells them straight how prison feels. He describes the 6x9 cell. He says he would rather be dead sometimes. That is not a dramatic line. That is a man showing the grind of time. His supporters fill the room. Family shows up. FBI agents show up. Attorneys show up. The vibe looks strong at first, like this might finally be the day the system admits what it did. Groman testifies about Operation Backbone. He talks about information Wersh gives from federal custody later, but he does not fully spell out Wersh's teenage informing. Greg Schwartz speaks too. He describes Wersh's character and remorse. He mentions timely and accurate information, but he does not pin down the timing either. After they speak, they leave optimistic. Then the whole vibe flips. Several high-profile Detroit police homicide figures show up to testify against him. It is unusual because they have no personal tie to his case. They do not know him, yet they appear anyway, like it is a mission. Dennis Richardson calls him manipulative. He points to a 2001 affidavit where Wersh overstates things. In that affidavit, Wersh claims he is a product of agencies who use him to distribute and supply narcotics. Then William Rice, a former homicide chief, starts talking about the era's gangs and ties Wersh to them by association. He does not explain why he is even there. He just paints the room with fear. Now the hearing shifts away from the actual conviction. It stops being about a nonviolent possession case. It turns into a punishment for a whole city's trauma. Witnesses start dropping wild claims about hundreds of kilos per month and uncharged violence. A DEA agent says kids not even born then can still name White Boy Rick and other crews. He uses that as a reason to keep him locked. In the end, the board takes no interest in recommending parole. They cite compelling adverse testimony from numerous law enforcement officers. After the parole disaster, his situation gets worse. The story says Wershey is involved, at least on the edges, in a stolen car ring operating out of prison. He is working with his sister over the phone to broker vehicles, some legit and others stolen. The prosecutor even acknowledges he is a minor player, but the famous nickname makes headlines. That is the curse of being branded. Wershey claims he pleads guilty only because prosecutors threaten to charge his sister and mother. He says he stops once he learns stolen cars are involved. Groman remembers it differently. Groman remembers Wershey admitting he knows some cars are stolen. He pleads guilty in 2005 and gets 5 years later. The person running the ring gets 18 months and others get probation. The case becomes a stain people can wave around. Even if it is not the original reason the parole board wants him buried, it becomes an easy talking point. The former parole board member, Robert Aguirre, later says the auto theft offense is noted, but not used as a reason for judgment against him. Aguirre does not believe that episode is the true heart of the resistance. Still, the practical result is brutal. The incident gets him moved out of federal protective custody as punishment and sent back into tougher state prison conditions. It also alienates some former supporters. Someone named Lynn Helland from the U.S. Attorney's Office is one of them. And that is the sick part. When you are already labeled, even your smallest slip becomes a hammer for people who never wanted to help you anyway. By 2010, Aguirre reviews Wershey's file and pushes for a new hearing. He cannot get the votes. A possible hearing never happens. Later, another is canceled. Over time, the why becomes the loudest part of the story. One theory is that he suffers for his fame. Colleagues remember the nickname White Boy Rick and cannot see past it. B.J. Chambers says, in his opinion, Wershey is caught up in reverse racism. Fishman says if he is anything other than white, nobody would have heard of him. Those are heavy claims, and they show how image can shape punishment. But the most jaw-dropping detail comes later. William Rice, the same former homicide chief who testifies against Wershey in 2003, later arrives at Oaks Correctional Facility as an inmate. Rice pleads guilty to perjury after phone records show he gives a false alibi in a quadruple murder case tied to his girlfriend's relative. He also pleads guilty to operating a criminal enterprise involving mortgage fraud and drug dealing. Rice does not even recognize Wershey at first. He is shocked when told who he is. Rice assumes Wershey is already released. That tells you how strange the sentence looks even to people inside law enforcement. Wershey asked Rice why he testified back in 2003 when he had no first-hand knowledge. Rice says he is following orders. Later, Rice signs a sworn affidavit saying he and others are recruited. He says the directive comes from higher-ups. He says prosecutors have him review sealed grand jury testimony Wershey gives under immunity, even though leaking such testimony is a felony. Rice's affidavit says the only rational explanation is that Wershey's file is red flagged. That means someone takes special interest in keeping him in. And Mike Castro, the undercover agent, believes Wershey is still in prison because he exposed police corruption and embarrassed powerful people. That is not street beef. That is power beef. And power beef does not end when the cameras leave. It drags on, quiet, patient, cold. And right here is where the story gets darker, because if his file is really red flagged, then the next question is simple. Who flags it and what are they trying to keep buried? By 2014, Rick Wersh Jr. is sitting at Oaks Correctional Facility in Manistee, Michigan. A writer walks in and clocks it right away. The place moves like a cold machine. Locked doors, checkpoints, a concrete visiting room, vending machines. Rick looks older than his age, hair shaved down, eyes sunken, legs thin from all that time boxed in. In 2015, reporting lays out Rick's daily routine at Oaks, 1 hour and 15 minutes in the yard, laundry work shifts, and a cell that feels like living in a bathroom. Rick says media lies ruined my life. He calls it one lie after another. Another write-up calls out how people keep calling him a kingpin, even though he is not charged with a conspiracy or racketeering. The same story says the prosecutor's office responds to a FOIA request by stating records supporting a gang do not exist. In 2015, Wayne County Circuit Judge Dana Hathaway grants a resentencing request. A new sentencing hearing is set for September 18, 2015. The point is that mandatory sentencing is now considered advisory, so his youth and circumstances should be weighed. Then June 22nd, 2016 hits. The Michigan Supreme Court denies an application for leave to appeal a Court of Appeals order. Another door slams shut. Still, the story does not die. Publicity in 2017 gets so loud that by July 14th, 2017, days before his 48th birthday, Rick is granted parole. He speaks during the meeting and keeps it simple. "I've lost 30 years of my life," he says. "All I can give you is my word. I'll never commit another crime." But the twist is savage. That parole does not lead to the street. It leads straight to U.S. Marshals, who take him to begin serving 5 years in Florida State Prison, tied to a car theft ring conviction. And the question gets sharper right here. If the system can move him fast when it wants to, who is really deciding when he ever gets to stop moving? A 2018 film describes him as the youngest FBI informant ever, recruited at just 14. That detail flips the whole Kingpin story. The streets see a kid with access. The feds see a kid they can use to get close to bigger names. In July 2020, Rick finally walks out as a free man after a run that lasts 32 years. He goes in as a teenager. He comes out a full-grown man in his early 50s. This is not a clean new life moment. This is more like stepping out of a cage into a world that keeps moving without you. New rules, new tech, new everything. But for him, the main thing is simple: freedom. And right away, the real question is not what is next. The real question is, can he even breathe in peace now, with his name still ringing in the streets and in the media like a siren? The Florida Department of Corrections says he's discharged from a residential work release program in Kissimmee, Florida. He is 51. He covers his head and gets into a car headed back to Michigan, moving quiet, like he is trying to slide out without the crowd. His attorney, Ralph Musili, keeps it plain. He's anxious to get home. Musili says his head is in a good place. He says Rick has a good support group. He says he is ready to get back into the real world. That sounds simple, but it is heavy. Everybody wants a piece of the story, and the story never really lets the person go. In 2021, his story hits a new milestone. He becomes known as the youngest nonviolent offender to serve more than 30 years behind bars. That stat makes people stop and stare because it sounds unreal. Then he takes it further. A massive lawsuit gets filed, $100 million, and the claim is nasty. He says what happens to him as a teenager is child abuse. He says people in power groom him, push him, and break promises. He says that world is what pulls him into drugs and criminality in the first place. The lawsuit names former Detroit police officers, retired FBI agents, former federal prosecutors, and the city of Detroit. And when he talks about the moniker, he makes it clear he hates it. He says it is not a real nickname. He says the media makes it up around the time of his arrest. That same year, he meets with Josh Landon, a reporter, at the corner of Mogul and Hayes on Detroit's east side. He stands there like a man who has been gone too long. When Landon asks what the neighborhood means, Rick says, "This is where I grew up. This was my hood, east side of Detroit where I grew up." He talks about his son too. He says his son grows up half a mile from there. He says while he is in prison, the child's mom makes sure he goes to college, so he is doing very well. Rick and Landon meet the morning before Rick announces the $100 million lawsuit. The timing is tight. It is tied to the anniversary of his prison release, just 2 days after he turns 52. Standing there hits him hard. "It's emotional standing here," he says. "It's been 34 years since I had a birthday free." He says the last time he was at that building, his dad was still alive. Now his dad is gone. That makes it heavier. He points around like he's trying to stitch his old life back together, piece by piece, and you can feel it. The block remembers. The block always remembers. Rick looks at Mac's barbershop and breaks it down. He says it used to be Rick's video palace. That is the place tied to his last birthday before prison. Landon asks if everybody knows about it. Rick answers in pure street tone, "Bro, this was famous." Then he keeps it honest about what it is. "Listen, I opened it up as like a front, or whatever you want to call it. But the twist is, it gets so popular, it turns into a real money-making business. That detail matters because it shows how the hustle works. Sometimes you set up a cover for the game, then the cover becomes the thing that really prints money." He talks about hanging on that corner with friends and partying late into the night. Then he drops a small memory that sounds funny but shows who he is back then. He says he parks his car right there. An officer tells him he is blocking the sidewalk. Rick argues back because he is young and stubborn. The officer writes him a ticket anyway. Landon asks what kind of car. Rick says, "A Mercedes-Benz. I was 17. Okay, that is a flex, but it is also a warning. When you are 17 with a Benz, people assume you are not just getting money. People assume you are in the mix. And once people assume that, the heat starts building." Rick admits something people in the neighborhood still tell him. They remember him buying stuff for the hood. They remember him stopping the ice cream truck and paying for everyone. But he says he is doing bad things to be able to do those good things. And as a kid, you do not always see it clear. Then he drops the line that ties back to the whole theme. "Not only did I do it as a child, but I was pushed into it by law enforcement. Let's not forget that," he says. Landon presses him. By those who took an oath to serve and protect. Rick answers, by those who took an oath to serve and protect. That is the heart of his claim. He is not just a kid making choices. He says he is coached, taught, and used. Later, he describes how prison changes his mindset. I did 33 years in prison, in a cage, he says. He says now he does not take small things for granted, even picking up a penny to take home and show his girlfriend Michelle. That is a man trying to act normal after living in survival mode for decades. And when a man comes out of that, every move feels watched. Every move feels like a test. During the Mogul and Hayes talk, Rick speaks on prison reform like someone who lives it. He says a lot of people in prison do not belong there. He says society would be just as safe if half the prison population is released. He says prisons are built for violent offenders and sex offenders, but there are tons of people inside who do not fit that category. He says we over-sentence them. He says he asks judges, lawyers, and educated people to explain the logic, and he keeps getting the same answer. I can't, he says. He compares long drug sentences to shorter sex offender sentences and says, that's sad. Then he talks about foster care. He says he works with the Team Wellness to help youth in the foster care system. He says 50 to 60% of kids he meets in prison say they are in foster care. Then they turn 18, and foster care basically tells them see you, and they have nowhere to go, so they fall into the prison system. Then he drops his harshest line about profit. It's become more of an industry and less about rehabilitation. He says, once you do something for profit, the rehabilitation is gone out of it. That line hits because it is not a street quote. It is a cage quote, and cage quotes come with scars. In 2021, another piece comes out that shows the cost behind the tough talk. Rick dabs his eyes while recalling one of the last conversations with his father, Rick Wershey Sr., who was suffering from brain cancer. Rick says his dad moaned in pain over the phone. He says in a 2014 call, his father tells him he is scheduled to die that day. Rick tells him it is not true, but his father insists his mind is playing tricks. Rick says, I lost it, and it's hard for me to talk about. He remembers breaking down in his counselor's office. He says he has a lot of pride and wants to go back to his cell to be alone, but the counselor hugs him and tells him, Rick, just stay here. Rick says he will never forget that. His father died about 2 weeks later on October 2nd, 2014. Rick was not allowed to attend the funeral. He describes it like another milestone stolen from him, and he blames it on the path he says the FBI and Detroit police push him into when he is young. That kind of loss does not leave you. It sits in your chest. It turns into fuel, and sometimes it turns into a legal war. On July 20th, 2021, the $100 million lawsuit gets even more attention. In the filing, he writes, had I not been an informant for the task force, I would never have gotten involved with the drug gangs or criminality of any sort. He also says he is coerced to keep working, even after an attempted assassination once local criminals suspect is linked to law enforcement. His attorney, Nabi Ayad, says Rick served the longest sentence of any nonviolent minor in Michigan history because the information he provided helped take down crooked police. Ayad argues they should extend the statute of limitations because Rick fears retaliation. He says prior lawyers tell him not to seek redress until he is out. At the press conference, Rick says, I want this chapter in my life closed, but officials will not comment because the case is pending. The FBI declines. The city of Detroit declines too. So the legal fight is on, and the feeling is clear. He is not just fighting for money. He is fighting the story itself, and the story has teeth. On May 10th, 2023, his name is back in headlines for a different reason. Police in Miami-Dade County arrested Wershey, 53, after accusing him of attacking his girlfriend of 4 months during a fight at his condominium. The report says the argument happens during sex. Police claim he utters another woman's name. He grabs her left arm and snatches jewelry he buys her. A witness reports seeing him punch her in the chest. When officers search him, they say he has keys to a Lamborghini, nearly $11,000 cash, a gold Rolex, 2 gold chains, and AirPods. He is released on a $5,000 bond. He faces a robbery by sudden snatching charge and a misdemeanor battery charge. On November 16, 2023, it is announced those charges are dropped because they are deemed unfounded. His attorney says the charges never should have been brought. Rick denies the allegations. He says he does not condone hitting women. He says being accused of something he is against is upsetting. So for a moment, it looks like more trouble is about to bury him again. Then it falls apart. But when your name is famous, even an unfounded case can still leave marks. People remember headlines more than they remember corrections. Back in September 2023, the big civil cases took a major hit. A federal judge dismisses 2 lawsuits Rick files, including the 2021 case, seeking $100 million. The judge says he waits too long and the claims are barred by statutes of limitations. Judge F.K. Bum says the claims are untimely. She says he does not meet the burden to show he acts as diligently as expected because he does not take action during his long prison sentence. Rick argues he fears retaliation if he speaks out, but the defense side pushes back and says he files other lawsuits while locked up, showing he has access to the legal system and is willing to sue powerful people. The judge agrees with that logic. She also notes the age of the claims makes it hard to find documents and witnesses if they are even still alive. Rick's lawyer says they are disappointed and vows an appeal to the Sixth Circuit. Rick repeats what he believes is the real reason for his long prison time, and now even his attempt to fight back is getting blocked. The system is not arguing his feelings. The system is arguing time, and time is a cold weapon. On January 19th, 2026, Rick pops back up with a new promise. He says for the first time his story will be told in its entirety in a new documentary. This time he says he's in control and it will be 100% true. He says they start filming about 3 days earlier. He says they will film in Detroit, including at the auto show. He says they will also film in Miami and the Caribbean. He teases that the documentary will cover things that never come out before, including his relationship with Augusto Willie Falcon, the cocaine cowboys figure he calls a dear friend. The big name attached is Hype Williams. Rick calls him iconic from rap culture. Rick says they met while working around a Busta Rhymes and Maluma video in Miami and they hit it off. Rick says Hype pitches it like this: "Bro, let's make history. Let me make this documentary." Rick also says he has personal vehicles on display at the Detroit Auto Show. And right there, you can feel the next chapter loading. Because when a man says he is finally telling the full truth, it usually means more names, more receipts, and more fallout are coming. And now the spotlight swings back, but the questions get louder. If Rick is 100% true this time, who is he really ready to put on blast? What names are about to hit the air that never could before? Is this doc his redemption, or just the next hustle in a long war with the system? What do you think he is still holding back? Who has the most to lose if he talks? And do you believe him now? Let us know what you think in the comments box below. And if you liked how we presented you this video, hit that like button and make sure to subscribe for more.